Installing an ADA shelf on a 4x6 cart. The hole in this cart is already cut, but we would start by placing our jig onto our cart. We would trace around the pattern on the inside of the jig, and then once it's removed, we can cut this hole out with a router. The purpose of this is to give us access between the two walls of the cart. Next, we'll place our bolt jig on top. Once it's on, slide it into place against the inside wall of the cart. Then you mark each of the 4 holes in the front of the jig. This is where we will drill in order for our furniture bolts to go through that will be installed in the shelf. With that finished, we're going to use a 3/8 drill bit to drill out each of the marks we made with our jig. We're going to use our furniture bolt jig to mark the holes for our furniture bolts to go through. Line this jig up with the edges of the ADA shelf, and then mark through each of the 4 holes. Now use a 3/16 drill bit to drill out each of the 4 marks we just made. With these pilot holes drilled, we can now install our 4 furniture bolts. You only have to drive the bolts in far enough to where the halfway point of the bolt sits about even with the edge of the shelf. If you happen to tap the bolts in too far, place a pair of vice grips on the center of the furniture bolt, and then back it out until it's even with the edge of the shelf like the others. We can now place the shelf onto the cart. It should line up, but if it doesn't, you may have to widen the holes a bit that are in the side of the cart, which we will show you how to do next. If you have to expand your holes, it's important to remember to only move side to side and not up and down. Moving side to side will make the hole slightly larger for the bolts to go through, but it will not compromise the leveling of the shelf. With these pilot holes widened, as you can see, the shelf now fits much easier. Now that our shelf is installed, we'll tighten up the nuts on the other side of the shelf to see how wide our gap is all the way around. If you're working with a crew, one can simply hold up the shelf while the other tightens the nuts, but if not, you can suspend it with some tape temporarily as you tighten the nuts. Now we'll have to insert our large shelf gasket into the side of the cart. It's important that the holes face up. The easiest way to do this is to turn the gasket long ways and feed it to the right ensuring that the holes are pointing up toward the top of the cart. Once the gasket is all the way inside, we can then suspend it onto our 4 furniture bolts. Now that our gasket's in place, we're going to use the washer, lock washer, nut configuration and just tighten them by hand for now. With all of our nuts in place, we can now tighten them. If you're going to use mechanical means like this impact, it's very important that you do not over-tighten the nuts. Doing this can crack the outer shell of the cart. It may be best to use a ratchet and hand tighten them. Now we can remove our masking, and we're going to use a bit of denatured alcohol to go ahead and clean up the surface where the shelf and the cart meet. This will ensure that there is no adhesive or leftover particles from all of the cutting we did. Now that that's all nice and clean, we're going to use some white silicone to smooth the edge of our shelf into our cart. You don't want to use too large of a bead, just a small amount that will be smoothed out to create a seamless look. Using our finger, we're going to very lightly smooth the caulk out. Start at your edges, work up to your corners, and then go across the top. Make sure to have a cloth to dab your finger off. Once the caulking is finished, you can see we have a nice smooth look to our shelf. Now we can cover our hole with a metal grate. Just place in a few self-tapping screws into the metal grate, and this will secure it and clean it up to where it doesn't look so bad with a hole in the cart. This concludes our training video.